Are we in a constitutional crisis? Not yet. Here's my thoughts as an attorney who researches constitutional law.
The whole world on fire and you can't even smell the smoke.
Forgive me, ladies, but I do smell the smoke and the gunpowder.
This video is about executive orders, and specifically whether executive orders threaten our democracy. My theory is that executive orders are actually the perfect test to our democracy. They ensure that everything is working right. And they ensure that we have the separation of powers. A lot of people are alarmed right now. They see this flurry of executive action, which, to be fair, these executive orders that are coming out, we've never seen this many in this short period of time as we have in the last month. Traditionally, we have seen executive orders come out from every president. And as we go through time, we see these executive orders not only increase in amount, but also in expand on the powers of the president. So, how do we not panic about these executive orders that are coming out at breakneck speed? Before I jump into the legal aspects of this, I want to recognize that these executive orders have a real effect on people. There are many people who are hurt right now because they have lost jobs, because they have lost funding for things that they need medically, things that they need in terms of food. There are a lot of people who are scared because of their immigration status, and none of the things that I'm about to say are a direct statement on those real harms that people are experiencing. So let's talk instead about the legal consequences here. How does this look for American democracy? I see two main camps when I'm reading about these issues on social media. And when I say reading about these issues, I mean looking at a news article and seeing the comments that people are making on them. And so there's the first camp that is very excited about Donald Trump's executive orders. They really support President Trump and they want to have the things that are happening through his executive orders to move forward. And they feel like this is a way to cut wasteful spending. This is a way to break down big government, which they find to be harmful to us. The other camp sees this as a full throttle attack on democracy. They're quick to label pretty much any action by President Trump as illegal. I find problems with both these sides and that they reduce the issue into something that probably falls more in the middle. The truth is, presidents have long been pushing the power of the executive branch. And so, what does that look like in the context of our modern democracy? Well, first, let's rewind and talk about what our democracy is made up of. So, the Constitution has divided our government into three branches. This is high school civics, but for those who didn't take a course like this or who have forgotten, let's talk about it. So we have the legislative branch, the first branch established by the Constitution, and honestly, the most powerful. And it's the most powerful because it is a multi body branch. There's a lot of people that have to go through things to make things happen. And their duty is to make laws. They also make decisions about where our money goes, how it's distributed. And they do this by creating bills that are turned into statutes that become our law. We also have an executive branch. That is our president, along with officers that he has that run agencies. The president's power is not only to sign bills into law, but to also enforce that law. And he does that through his agencies. It's also important to remember the president, the executive branch, has a lot of power over foreign policy. That is historically how it's been. Lastly, we have the judicial branch, and that's made up of the Supreme Court, also with federal courts that have been created over time. But the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbitrator of federal law. And what that means is that they review laws for constitutionality. They also review statutory provisions to interpret them for government, private parties who may be trying to apply those laws in wherever sphere they need to apply them. So, what happens when the president acts outside of his constitutional powers? Well, there's checks and balances to deal with that. We have the option of Congress to impeach the president and ultimately remove them if they would like to do that. That doesn't happen very often. More frequently, what happens is that the president's actions, whether through regulations, through executive orders, are reviewed by the courts, with many of them going up to the Supreme Court. Let's take Biden v. Nebraska. This was a recent case that came out during the Biden presidency. And President Biden was seeking through his agents to forgive a swath of student loans through emergency powers that were granted because of the COVID-19 pandemic. What the court there said that the president's power is circumscribed either within the Constitution or within the powers granted by Congress. And the Supreme Court did not find that the emergency powers granted it by something we call the HEROES Act was the was actual authority granted the president to do something as large as forgive a bunch of student loans. In fact, here's a quote from the case. The question here is not whether something should be done, it is who has the authority to do it. When the Supreme Court reviewed Biden's action, that was democracy in action. It did its job to say, is this constitutional? Does this fit in our understanding of the Constitution? The court said no. We have the separation of powers and we're going to respect those separation of powers. Similarly, when the court upholds presidential actions as valid, that's the Constitution working. So, what about Trump? Some of his executive orders fall squarely in traditional authority of the president. And though they may be challenged, they probably aren't going to make much traction because those presidential powers are given to him through either the Constitution or other statutory authority. However, there are other actions that are not so clear. Can the president choose not to use funds that has been allocated by Congress? Can he cut government programs without going through a notice and comment type period? Can he ignore or change laws by Congress? These questions are much bigger, and some of his executive orders implicate these questions. And you'll see many, many of the lawsuits that are being filed against President Trump and his agencies right now bring up a claim of separation of powers, that the president is violating constitutionally established separations of power. So when we talk about separation of powers legally, this is not just some civics lesson that everyone knows. It's what is really at play here in terms of lawsuits. Interestingly, conservatives have a lot of pushback to these lawsuits, trying to characterize judges as liberal hacks, but it has been a conservative push that presidential power be limited, and that is where the direction the Supreme Court has gone. And so expanding presidential power to change what Congress does would be a pretty drastic change from the course that the Supreme Court has taken based on the direction it has been pushed. And so lawsuits become this important laboratory of whether our democracy will or will not stand. In fact, they're crucial. Executive action is supposed to be challenged. Our country has become so politicized. It's really the only place where us as citizens can challenge anything as unconstitutional, no matter which party is in power. I think we will see that regardless of the political ideology of judges, both on the Supreme Court and on the lower courts, that a consistent rule of law will withstand. And the court will recognize that its previous jurisprudence limiting the power of the president to not change what Congress has done will rule the day. It'll be especially compelling where there is a Congress in power that has the same partisan alignment as the president. And so those actions could be done procedurally in the proper mechanisms by going through Congress. By the courts doing that, this is not an attack on conservative ideology. It is upholding the constitutional separation of powers, and the courts will uphold their constitutional duty as well and not a partisan ideology. Now, I do want to note there's a question of whether the president will comply with any orders that come from the court. And I think that's an important question, and that's not one I'm going to answer here because A, I don't know. If he got an order against him, I don't know. I can't read the president's mind. I wish I could. But that's not what's at stake here right now. We're not in a constitutional crisis until the separation of powers are truly failing. If that day comes, those will be other circumstances we're not going to talk about right here, but we're just not there yet. And I hope that you'll give me your thoughts and your comments. I want to be respectful in the comments and recognize that even though we might have different partisan views, you and I, or you and somebody else in the comments, that's not really what this is about. This is about our Constitution and what we understand the Constitution to mean. And so if you have thoughts on that, please share below. If you have other questions you'd like me to discuss about the Constitution, this is an issue that's really important to me. I'm really passionate about the Constitution, and I'd love to do so. And you can put those questions below as well. If you like this content, give it a like so that I can know to make more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.